I want to ask Kathy to talk to us for a few minutes about organizing in Boston. That'll be followed by kind of a brief question and answer period. I'm sorry it's going to be as tight as it is. And then we'll move into Kathy coming back to tell us how we move into the next phase of of our session today.
Dear President Clinton, please do not hurt Iraq. In a way, we are one family. So in a way, you are hurting your own family. Sincerely, Megan, second grader, King Open School. Dear President Clinton, you don't know how much the world means to me. Maybe the president of Iraq did a lot of bad things, but don't go on making things worse. Dear President, I feel bad about you dropping a bomb and you are killing people just like you. If I were you, I would try talking like Dr. Martin Luther King. He said what he wanted and he made it so people could understand how he felt. I think you should talk instead of dropping bombs. It would feel bad because you made speeches about caring. Then you start violence with guns and bombs. I am a second grader, and I am also 7. I know how you feel, but I also feel sad that a good president would drop bombs. Dear President Clinton, I think instead of dropping bombs on Iraq, you should just go to Iraq and talk to him, Saddam Hussein. Dear President Clinton, I think instead of dropping bombs on Iraq, you should just go to Iraq and talk to him, Saddam Hussein. And you can figure out the problem. I learned the very same thing from my school and also from my mom. If you send bombs, why would that be a good idea? Why would you even want to be dropping them? It's better to talk to the person in Iraq. Why I don't like bombs and weapons is because when you drop bombs or use weapons, people die. Why would you want to be shooting guns at your own friend? Weapons are not at all good because they hurt people when you make them work. Maybe this should happen. If one person decides not to do the war, maybe everybody else will do the same. I think you should just decide to give up and try something better. I am 6 years old. This is signed Sasha Alec, Nancy Alec's 6-year-old son. It says, P.S. My mom wrote down these words for me, but they are my words. I think the point that Sasha makes about one person deciding not to do this is part of why we're here today, is to expand that to be one person and one more person and one more person. How we got here today in this room, this very specific organizing, is somewhat haphazard. Some people who were listening to the news felt that there must be a different story, who knew intuitively and historically, and because they had been there, that what we were being told was wrong. And about 17 people gathered 2 weeks ago and said, let's do something. And those 17 people organized a demonstration which ended up at Arlington Street Church with 450 people. I want to acknowledge some of the groups, but really the groups are just individuals. People from Mobilization for Survival, Peace Action, American Friends Service Committee, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the July 26th Coalition, Socialist Workers' Party, Boston Committee on the Middle East, Veterans for Peace, Arab Student Organization at MIT, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, National People's Campaign, International Action Center, Food Not Bombs, La Casa, Unite, World Federalists, and the Coalition for a Strong United Nations. I'm sure there are other people today who will be adding the names of other groups to that list. One of the things that I think is true is that at the point at which many of us organized against the Gulf War, some of the organizations, some of the peace organizations, some of the neighborhood organizations, some of the faith-based organizations were stronger than we are at the moment. Some places like Moab used to have 3 or 4 staff people. Peace Action used to have 3 or 4 staff people. Now we don't have that many. So one of the things I'm going to ask at the moment is we're going to pass some buckets around. Hope somebody has those. And if you would be willing to make a donation, if you need to write a check, well, we have this committee, but we actually don't have an identity, so I guess you might write it to Mobilization for Survival or Iraq, but otherwise you could put money in this. We'll be using the money to help defray some of the expenses for today, but we're also using the money to try and hire some folks to help do this organizing. Some of the things that we have planned coming up. The we is really all of us, I have to say. The next step, Monday night at 6 o'clock at Mobilization for Survival, is a meeting. A meeting for people who want to help us continue to do this organizing. 6 o'clock at Mobilization, that's at 11 Garden Street. Next Wednesday, we're planning a demonstration gathering at 4:30 at Park Street. And we're going to be doing something that you'll want to be a part of. And we're going to be ending up at 6:30 at St. Paul's Cathedral, right at Park Street. On Saturday, people will be getting on buses and going to New York on February 28th. And on Sunday, March 1st, there will be a rally gathering at 2 p.m. at Copley Square. Day before yesterday, I walked from one end of Cambridge to the other. I started at Mass Avenue and Arlington Street and walked for 5 hours to the end of Mass Avenue right out here at MIT with a sign that said, "Why bomb? I'm walking for peace." And I talked to people along the way, 75, 100, 125 people, just asked them what they thought. First, I asked them what they thought about President Clinton's intention of bombing Iraq, and then I started to ask them what they thought about President Clinton's intention to use our money to bomb Iraq, and whether they had ideas about how that money could be used here at home. It was an important and humbling walk for me. There were a significant number of people who were already clear that in some ways the United States was the terrorist. There were some people who thought that and understood that. But there were also a lot of people who talked about Saddam Hussein as a psychotic version of Hitler, where everything needed to be done to take him out. I heard people say to me, "You can't trust Arabs." I heard people talk a lot about Hitler. I talked to someone who had been in the Gulf War and said, "We need to go back and finish the job." And I talked to a woman whose husband fought in Vietnam and whose son fought in the Gulf War. And I asked her, "What does your son think about this?" She said, "We're working on just getting my son back together." And we sat there and talked about what war actually does, both for the people who are the victims and for the people who are the aggressors. And we sat and cried together on Mass Avenue. But the last group of people that I spoke to were people who said, "Gee, I don't know, I don't have an opinion. I don't know what to think about it." So our task is a big task. Our task is to talk to people, to spread the word about the kind of America that Howard was talking about, a kind of great America, a kind of nonviolent, moral direction for America by trying to stop this bombing and lift the sanctions. After the question and answers, I urge you to stay, because we have two different ways that we could organize. Our government is choosing to use violence to be the greatest bully in the world. We have a strategy for organizing which is nonviolent. We have a strategy for organizing a movement and taking to the streets and responding which promotes a different vision, a nonviolent vision. Secondly, our government is interested in dictating from the top down. And our strategy is to create a movement of cells of people who will organize from the bottom up, capable of being a truly democratic force of people who can meet, talk through the issues that you heard today, talk through the strategies, find ways to support one another so that the movement that we build to oppose this bombing begins to model the kind of society that we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to ask all the speakers to please come forward, and some people will need, I don't know if we got quite enough chairs, but we'll do our best. Some people may need to stand, but Howard, come, please get a chair. And I think we've got, what does my time say here? We've got between 10 and 15 minutes to do questions and answers here. I would ask people to keep your question tight, so we don't bite into the time too much. Hand here.
Just a very quick informational question. Just when I thought there would be no reason to own a television set, I heard about this wonderful situation at Ohio State University, and I really wished that I could have actually seen it. And, of course, absent the advertising. Does anybody in the room, any of the panelists, have a copy of a tape, naked videotape of that broadcast? I have it with me.
Okay, great. Correction made. Next question. Yes, you go back here. This fellow here. Yeah. This fellow right here with the jacket.
Yes, I'm Bill Keach. I'm teaching Brown University with the International Social Organization. I want to come back to something that Howard Zinn said at the very beginning of his remarks. It seems to be tremendously important for our building this anti-war movement as big as it needs to be. And that is, we have to connect what we're saying about the war against the Iraqi people to the war here at home against poor people, against immigrants, against working people. If we talk about Iraqi children suffering and being killed, we have to talk about children here at home who are suffering because of poor housing and malnutrition.
Okay. Next question here. Woman here. Yes.
I want to know why many of the speakers are building the illusion that we can have a moral and peaceful America when this country is run by profit makers. And these wars are no accident. They're inevitable outgrowth of capitalism. Why nobody talked about why we have to build a movement to destroy capitalism?
We do without bombs.
Well, I would love to destroy capitalism. But I don't think we have to wait for that moment in order to stop a war. We did that, we succeeded in stopping a war in Vietnam. And we didn't destroy the system that breeds wars, and I agree. We have a problem every time we accomplish something that the system remains intact. And yet the only way the system will be overthrown, the only way we are going to bring about a new kind of social and economic order is if we struggle on everything that comes along and bit by bit build a great social movement which will one day bring about fundamental change.
This fellow here and then this woman. Yes.
My name is Javier. I'm with the Revolutionary Commons Youth Organization, Spartacus Youth Club. That one makes a point that the only way you're going to change the society, get rid of the capitalist system, which breeds imperialism, which breeds war, is to international socialist revolution.
Questions? If we could have some questions rather than some more lectures, it would be nice.
Question: Why did these same people who now do not call on the UN, but to stop the
why do these same people on the panel right here, who in the first Gulf War called for UN sanctions against Iraq instead of a war, called to get rid of them now?
I mean, I think that there was a huge opposition to the sanctions.
No, there wasn't.
Yes, there was. There was January 19th in Washington, D.C. 100,000 people were there, and they were against the sanctions. And as a matter of fact, Ramsey Clark has gone to Iraq every year to document the effects of the sanctions. There is a movement against the sanctions. It needs to be much bigger. It needs to be as big as the anti-war movement.
Just to say that the two demands, the 2 points of unity of the Emergency Committee are no bombing and remove the economic sanctions. Yes?
I'm a member of the Spartacus League, and actually both the campaign and the coalition in 90 and 91 trailed after the liberals that supported the sanctions. Now it's easy, now that you see what happened with the sanctions. We think that...
You have a question?
You have a question of why you want to shut people up when they have something different to say.
Because we have a lot of people here who want to speak.
20 seconds.
Young man,
As Lenin said,
How many people are here to speak?
capitalism, and we need to mobilize the working class, break with the Democrats and the Republicans, fight for socialist revolution.
Go for it. Go for it. Next question. In back. Yes.
Yes, I want to know why the committee didn't say that we need to break with the racist Democrats of Bill Clinton just as much as we need to break with the racist Republicans of Newt Gingrich and Trent Lott. I'm saying that because we all prefer the revolutionary socialist party in this country and in every country. In the Middle East, against the Ba'athist regime and the Zionist rulers, and in this country, breaking with the racist Democrats.
Do you want to speak to this?
You know, I guess for me, the notion of organizing for fundamental social change has been what my life is about. And for doing that in a way that begins to model the kind of social change we're interested in creating. I have been a part of this work not as long as Howard and others. But one of the things that happens when we start to come together is sometimes that we start to attack each other.
Yes.
Sometimes that happens. For me, one of the greatest disgraces during the Gulf War was that there were 2 separate demonstrations organized. One on the 19th and one on the 26th. Many of us went to both of them. Today, part of what we're trying to model in this committee is finding the places where we can unite and support one another. There are a lot of people who aren't here. We've heard that they're voices of clergy. We've heard that there's other voices of students. There was a group of 200 people from the Islamic Society who demonstrated in front of Cambridge City Hall. Part of what we're trying to do is find the places of agreement, and then in working together, we can begin to educate one another to take on the same kinds of things that you're talking about. But this isn't the moment to be ripping each other apart and saying, why haven't we gone this far? Why can't we agree with that? And part of what has been so powerful for me in sitting in these meetings is the extent to which people who have very principled perspectives on the Middle East and very principled perspectives about what kind of social change should look like in this country. They differ with each other, but all of those are principled positions. People have been willing to say, let us work in harmony with each other. It is very different in 1990, the spirit that's been in the room of the organizers. Many of you who are here, we are really trying to use a tone, use a respect to slowly build something that really can bring about some of the kind of fundamental social change you're talking about. So I ask you to try and bear that tone with one another, because that is how we will actually make it happen.
We've got time for 2 questions. Please make them tight.
Paul Beresford, Samantha Smith, Chapter Veterans for Peace. I congratulate, we're not interested in the politics of the now. I want you to address the politics of how to get the people of this nation into the streets. Support the Muslims who went out yesterday, where we didn't hear about it. What about the Catholic Church? How do we get all these people out? If you address that question.
Actually, we will in just a few minutes.
That's what the next 2 hours are about. Last question here.
Yeah, if I could just state a perception of mine and ask the speakers to respond. It seems to me that the Clinton administration has actually been organizing for a war for a number of months. And like in 1990, they continue to try to say we're doing everything we can diplomatically to have a peaceful solution, while all the time what they're doing is driving towards war. That is, diplomacy is part of the cover for going to war. And to me it's important because it can be disarming for people to say, well, not start with the fact they're going to a war and organize against that as a principle. And then secondly, if anyone could state, I'm of the opinion that the U.S. should have no presence whatsoever in the Mideast, inspectors, spies, military, or anything else, and that, we should say just U.S. out of the Mideast totally. And if you could comment on that as well.
Let me at least comment on the first statement. C. Wright Mills was a very famous sociologist, and that's my field. He was also the father of the New Left during the 60s. Once had a wonderful expression. He said, the problem with countries like the United States is that they are crackpots. Crackpots in the sense that they prepare for war because they say war is inevitable, and then they produce war. And the problem is that we've never really prepared for peace. Now, there is, and I think Mike agreed, C. Wright Mills, he had a lot more important things to say. That's number one. Number two, whether one wants to talk about this one or that one out of the Middle East, the question becomes one that's very different. The real question, I think, is what kind of world order are we going to have? And not George Bush's world order, not Mr. Clinton following those footsteps, but rather that we've reached a stage, and I think this is where groups like this are important, where we have been trying to take one step out of an old history, which is based on states and state power and state authority, into a system which is based on some sort of world authority, not necessarily giving up full sovereignty and culture and so forth. And we haven't been able to get there. We started after World War I with the League of Nations, and then when we didn't equip with the power, we have the United Nations. I'm glad it's there. And we still haven't equipped it with power. We're not willing to give up enough sovereignty to solve these problems in such a way that has, in essence, the world's health at stake. And so,
I'm Mark Bruzonsky, your host for this weekly program, Mideast Realities, and thank you for watching. If you too are concerned about the situation in today's Middle East and about U.S. policies toward that crucial region of the world, and if you'd like to meet like-minded persons, why don't you come to one of our weekly social meetings? I'll be there, of course. Just give us a call for details.